What are we here for? Ms. Christine Hill, leadership consultant and coach, Christine Hill, LLC. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about her. Christine has coached over 500 Milwaukee leaders. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
It includes me and a lot of people in this room and online. If Christine has coached you and you're online, say something in the chat. If she's coached you and you're in this room, raise your hand. Give us what did she tell you in the chat? In the chat, tell us, what did you learn from Christine? A lot of people know her through Marquette's Future Milwaukee program. We're sort of associated that way, but just in the community as a leader, instructor, teacher. I feel like maybe you did boot camp. And that's how I met you.
2 or 3 times.
Yeah. At Rock.
That's not how you met me.
It's not. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So she's technically retired. And we're all asking questions about his retirement and everything that we all think in the hope and dream. Find out. But she's still coaching. So she's bringing her 40 plus years of experience to leaders on the move. She was, okay, let's get ready. The first woman mayor in Milwaukee County's history. Okay. The first suburban MMSD commission chair. Yeah, let me make sure I'm right. She's served as an alderperson, and she's done all of these other things that we're going to talk about today. So I know Christine is all about pushing others to see our best possible selves and our future and not being afraid. And today I just want to find out how she's been able to do that for herself. And you'll all have a chance to ask her questions too. So with that, welcome the great Christine.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for you applaud yourself.
You should.
Yeah.
Lesson number one. On thyself.
Oh boy, what do you want, coach?
Just feel like when you get somebody read a bio like that. Just what is that? She's done this and this and that. And that. Like, you look back and think, how did I do all that? Does it make you a little embarrassed? What does it feel like?
It doesn't, a quick story, my husband would say, you know, you really need to accept the fact that you did these things. And I would never talk about the fact that I was the first woman mayor in Milwaukee County's history. And he is a research kind of a geek about that. And so he's the one that told me about it. And it took me a long time. And every time we go to, a function or event, he'd say, this is my wife. And he was very involved in public sector and whatnot. This is my wife. She was the first. Eventually, he said, then you say it, because one of us needs to say it. So I say it, and it's taken me probably 15, 20 years to say it as if I'm claiming it, rather than saying it because you're going to bring it up because, So, yeah, kind of nice now.
What did saying it first do? How did it change the dynamic? Did it change you? Did it change how people responded to you?
Yeah.
What was the difference?
I almost think if you talk about yourself in negative terms, if you call yourself stupid when you do something that might be stupid, but your language to yourself and about yourself, either privately or publicly, will be how you are. And I noticed a shift as I've gotten older, and trust me, it took me a long time to come to any kind of self-awareness that I feel now. But I think that is a step in the process, is to really listen to your language about yourself. And when you claim something that you've done and you bring it up to your family and your friends, they might be a little uncomfortable with it, but too bad. They're probably uncomfortable with it because they're uncomfortable with their own. So that's really how I got to be able to claim that part of myself. And then I thought, I guess that is kind of cool.
What is that about us what do you think we learn? I mean, you've probably coached this out of a lot of people or helped them realize that they're doing stuff like investors. Sometimes I've got to a place now where I can speak matter of factly about my skills and talents.
Good.
And it's only sometimes when it's something like if a person reacts in a shocked way. Like sometimes I'll say one thing I know about myself that I will say is that I'm a likable person. That like it's kind of hard not to like me if you meet me. And I'm not doing it on purpose, but I realized it when I was like 20. And I was trying to get this job, and this man interviewed me. And the only thing that he wrote down during the interview in the notes, because I did get the job and I saw it on his desk later. So I saw what he wrote about me and everybody that he interviewed. And he just said likable. No, he said pleasant. She's pleasant. And everybody else was like, he was like, and I realized like, oh, this is like, you can get a job. So that's the thing that made me realize that it was a quality. And I was somewhat removed from it, but it was like, I can say that in a matter of fact kind of way. But there are times where if I'm talking to somebody and I say that, I can see them get uncomfortable that I said it. And I don't, and that makes me think that the things about them that are also true and positive, maybe they feel like that's rude to say, or maybe that's like rude to say. Yeah, what is that? What have you seen? Where does that come from in us?
I can probably speak more for the female person. My mother was an extraordinary woman, but you would never have known that she had the talent she did. And that was because you were seen and not heard, quite literally, like children. And in fact, I came across a letter from her my freshman year at Carroll University. And she must have gotten wind of something about me being a little bit more assertive. That's not the word she would have used, but being a little bit more assertive. And in there was a line that's on a Smith Corona with onion skin. So you all are going to know what that is, onion skin paper. I'm so glad. In there was a line, and she said, you know, I'm told that you aren't being very ladylike, that it isn't feminine to essentially speak what you feel or speak what you know, that it's much more feminine. But in those days, that was 1968, 72, you went to college, many of us, to get a husband. And so, boy, my mother tells me that's not, but that was her generation. We came through kind of a seismic shift in the 60s and 70s. And I think that what my reaction to that, clearly I never responded. I looked to see if I had a letter from that responded to it. I must have just gone, okay, and put it in my eyes or something. But I think that's the way people are raised. And people are still raised, and not just don't blame yourself because it comes across as being arrogant. There's a difference between arrogance and really believing and loving yourself. And it's the believing and loving yourself and being self-aware enough to know when you mess it up that really distinguishes you as an individual. You can read that on people. You know when they're being authentic. You know when they're... No, I think it's very much generational.
Okay. I'm really curious what your answer is going to be about this, even what you just said about your mom. Now, this is one of the questions you as a kid. I wish I had one of your kid pictures to put us. Good. What's it? Send the link to a picture.
Let's talk about it.
What were you asking? These pictures, what were you? Oh my God, it's so cute.
They're about 4 or 5.
Okay, yeah, a picture of 5 years old. So, like, who were you? Who did your parents say? Were you like around tomboy, getting dirty?
We see that word, that tomboy, right?
Yeah.
The pictures show me in little dresses a lot, and I had an aunt who did smocking, what they called smocking on dresses. Beautiful, beautiful. And I think it hid a lot of what it was
Okay.
naturally. But again, you know, two brothers, and then suddenly me, many years later, this cute little thing. I mean, I was adorable. And but I'm inside now. Inside now. And I don't mean to, if you have families listening to this, you can get me in. I'm sorry. The thing about family is that, assuming you had one when you grew up, there are, for most of us, things that occur in our lives growing up. And when we get to be grown-ups, we sort of shed the reality of that. And we just simply think we're presenting ourselves without that. The reality is that you carry, I'm still 4. I'm still 3, 2, 1, whatever before that. And I think that my parents saw me as being adorable. I think they were excited about me. My dad called me sugar. And I think my oldest brother probably thought I was great because he was my oldest brother. And I looked up to him constantly, still do. And my other brother, who's deceased, was caught in the middle. Any middle children? Oh, look at this.
Yeah, my
See,
mom was.
you know, right? It's like, hello, I'm here.
Yeah.
But I think what was going on, my father was an alcoholic. My mother, as you heard me say earlier, had been raised to really sort of can't have conflict. And by conflict, I mean, if I have a disagreement with you, they didn't know how to navigate that. They weren't taught, many of us aren't taught how to navigate a healthy conflict. And so I think they were very distracted by their lives. And that, as my girlfriend, I spent a couple of days ago, I was with my girlfriend of almost 65 years, and we lived across the street from each other and grew up across the street from each other. And the street and the, trees, the elms, I love elms. They were our lives. We spent very little time inside. So I think most of I was able to be myself in a sense. And I think my parents just probably thought I was cute. Now, as I got older, I think they thought I was cute. Isn't she cute? Make them laugh. I loved making my parents laugh. But I also think that as time went on, that wasn't the case. We fall off cute. I don't know if this is a girl thing or a boy thing or whatever, but we fall off cute when we start into that prepubescent, stuff. And then my father was horrified. It's like, I don't know what to do with this. I've had 2 sons. And I think for me, that's very lonely. And if it hadn't been for this friend of mine across the street, I think, oh no. No.
What were you exhibiting? Was it like pushing back on the rules? Were you
Oh,
sassy?
I would say I was pretty traditionally 50s female to a point. And then once I sort of was cut loose in the neighborhood, I wanted to be a teacher from the time I can remember, 5 or 6. And I remember very distinctly, because I'm a control freak, I remember very distinctly telling all the little kids, loved the fact that they were younger than me, loved it. You can appreciate this to me. And I would line them up on our stairs, and I was standing. Of course I'm standing. That's how you have control, right? You stand, you either sit at the head of the table or you stand. And I would, okay, now you and you and you and you. I wouldn't have done that inside. I wouldn't have done that around my family. My family was a different world. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, I must have compensated. Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit before about my experience with finding out that I'm ADHD.
Yes, let's talk about that.
And if that's okay.
Yeah.
And do people know me? Or I would tell somebody who knew me, they go, yeah. This is not new. You know, your ADHD, yes. But I was 72 when I found out a year ago. And what I think a lot in those growing up years, I could be that person with this friend that I had across the street. I could be my ADHD self.
Yeah.
In my home. I didn't conform to what was going on.
Mhm.
I didn't conform to the educational expectations. I didn't conform in so many ways that it was a relief to go outside. So again, I go back to what I said. I don't know that my parents knew me really well.
Yes, okay.
And I didn't know them very well, other than what I could, you know, experience. So what's your question?
How did it, okay, let's start. How did the ADHD, like, how does it present in you? Is it? I mean, because there probably shouldn't be, or don't, there are people who just found out, or people who have known for a while and cope with it.
Women in particular, and women my age, or certainly older, because we didn't have that diagnosis back then. We were called bossy, or I was called bossy a lot. Sassy, like you said, tomboy. A lot of that was energy, and that energy was only supposed to be realized in the boys, not in the girls. So let me, long story short, I was gifted with a dear friend who passed a couple of years ago. And she invited me to, I say invited, she was dying of cancer. And she asked if I would come and be with her. And I had moved to Madison by that time but she was my next door neighbor in Oak Creek all those years. She was in the political field with me all those years. So that was an important tie. And so I stayed with her. And after she died, I was her trustee. And I found the transition of caregiving and emotional support to trustee, which is much more legal, financial, and math was not my thing, to be extraordinarily difficult. It was, not that it wouldn't be difficult for anyone, but I think because of that neurodivergency, it just really made it difficult. And one of my children observed that. One of my grown children. And fortunately, that grown child has a background and is doing work in neurodivergency. And so brought it up at some point and very carefully said, what are you like? I know enough about the human being and communications to know where are we going with this conversation. But I'm most grateful to my children for this because it as it turned out, it really was that shift, and how I was responding to that shift from emotional, essentially, my hippocampus, and now I've got to be in my cerebral cortex, right, all the time, executive functioning. Well, what do I do with this other? Well, we force ourselves to go into the executive functions, but that means that it's really hard to feel. It's really hard to process grief. It's really hard to. So I did. After the first of the year after she passed, I went to a psychiatrist. And the fun thing was, I feel like I should be sharing conversation with her, but I'll just keep talking.
Just talk to them.
Yeah. Yeah. The fun thing was that I got there. Now, mind you, not a lot of 72-year-olds go to and get assessed for ADHD, although it is happening more often. And I would encourage anybody that is in that situation to have that done. But anyways, I went, and there were two medical residents, psychiatric residents, and an intern. The real psychiatrist had not shown up yet, but they, sort of pummeled me with questions. I had anticipated because I'm a bit of a control freak, I had anticipated they're going to ask me about my history, and my children also encouraged me to look at my history. And when I went back, and if you do this, even if you're 40 right now, I started looking at my history and my response. I don't memorize. And everything was memorization when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s. I don't hold that information. And it's not because I'm senile. This was true of me at 6 and 7 and 8. I don't read. It's very hard for me to read and retain. I tend to get, and I'm probably doing it now, louder and louder. Don't ever watch a Packer game with me. I have my children, my youngest watches a Packer game, but the rest of them, heck no, because I scared the heck out of them by my screaming and because the emotion runs so fluidly and freely in me that I don't monitor it.
Yeah.
I don't catch it before it's done. So all those markers, grades, things people told me that I was or I wasn't, I finally got to the end of that with them. And the psychiatrist came in. And the young woman resident, they were wonderful. But because I had all this information, this psychiatrist comes in, sits down and says, well, looks at the two residents and says, so do you have a sense of, is she ADHD or, they try to be really careful because it's a tricky topic, obviously. And the young woman was so great. She looked at me and she said, and she looked at her colleague and she said, yeah. Yeah. And I started to cry. And I understand that a lot of individuals, parents particularly, whose children are tested and come to some neurodivergent outcome, that it's not easy. I get it. But after 72 years of believing you're stupid, I know. To have someone say, you actually adapted in an otherwise unfamiliar, unfriendly environment your entire life. And now part of that's white privilege. Okay, let's be honest. But it was also, I don't know, the gift of chutzpah. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was just, and those acts of defiance almost, I think of it as that, made me who I am. So I'm hypersensitive to people and kind of where they're at. Because I always had to be hypersensitive because people weren't reading me. And so I'm always, okay, you safe? I know you're safe. That's a gift.
Yep.
It's not a pleasant gift to come by, but that's a gift.
Yeah, the way.
So that's what I cried. It was like, yeah, that's stupid.
Yeah.
And we all have a 5-year-old self, a 3-year-old self, a 6-year-old self, a 12-year-old self, whatever period of time you had. And I just spent some time in silence after that when I got home, having conversations with my 5-year-old self, my 7-year-old self. It's like, wow,
You're good. Like you're
good.
Like
You're good.
nothing's wrong.
And it's fun. It's hard because you say that, like you said earlier, people get a little uncomfortable when you're kind of feeling yourself. It's hard because that's not, a lot of religions aren't set up that way. A lot of cultures aren't set up that way. You've been told that's not. Oh, please love yourself. Don't wait till you're 72 years old. All those years I was talking to you and some of you, I wasn't listening. It was hard. So that's my story.
If you had known, if you had gotten this diagnosis 20, 30 years ago,
Oh, wow.
Maybe if you get it when you're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you don't develop some of the ability to read people. Maybe some of those skills aren't there. I wonder.
You may, yeah, I don't know.
You don't know.
Right.
But you could probably imagine if you had known this 20 years ago, 30 years ago, any tools or things that you have available to you now, or ways that you adjust now, whatever you've learned since you've been diagnosed, have any of those learnings, are they things that would have helped you navigate the world differently if you had known them earlier? Or do you just feel like, it did, the chips fell how they fell, and this is.
Yeah, that's a tough question, because I think it is what I have.
Mhm.
And that's really all you can work with. And I think where I'm grateful is that when I decided in my 30s, certainly 40s, 50s, 60s, and now 70s, to reach out, to seek out therapy, to seek out not for the purpose of ADHD diagnosis, but to seek out therapy for depression. I mean, when you have that experience as a young person, it affects you chemically. If anything else, I would say I might not have the physical symptoms of my history had I not had that history. But my belief is that these things are real. Every single one of us was 5, at least, unless you're from another planet. And going through life is just going through life. What you choose to do with it, or what you have the resources to do with it, is something else. It's hard to imagine that I would be my person.
Yes.
If I hadn't gone through all that. Could there have been kinder times? Could there have been times that I was more confident? Yes. Quieter for my children? Yes. But I do think that ultimately it's very difficult for me to think how that might have been different.
Yes, but it's helpful to know or have.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I mean, I think of all the kids that don't know, that think they're stupid, or whose families struggle because they aren't doing well in an institution that may not be designed for their neurodivergent needs. I think I've been told, it sounds a little corny, so, but I think I have a bit of a superpower in the write-up. You said something, but how does she know? How does she know about where I might be?
Yep.
I don't know. But I do want to know. And I want to know at a level of patience and curiosity and all of that. And I think that I don't think I'd be this person if that had been the case.
I feel like it's like you can tell when we don't know, or like you can sense when we are afraid. And so I'm just like, I'm trying to hide from everybody else, but if I sit in front of you, that's like, she's gonna see that I'm insecure, afraid, or you just always see it. When you
truly at my end, it's like, oh, I kind of pushing too hard. Here's this new person. Tell me, what your life was like when you were 5. What have you struggled with? And I'm not a therapist. I could be. I have enough years in of therapy, but yeah, I mean that can be annoying. I have to learn. That's self-awareness. Come on, reel it back in. You don't have to know. Leave this person to be how they need to be. But that's because I needed that information to survive.
Yes.
So I get anxious if I see that your face looks like you're concerned, but you're telling me you're happy. There's a disconnect here. So that disconnect is what I see. You can't hide from me.
No, you cannot hide. If you don't want to be seen, stay away from Christy. It's time to graduate high school.
Yeah.
What did you think you were gonna do?
Teach.
Well, get married. Be a teacher.
Get married.
Okay, get married.
Yeah, that was first. And then I thought I was going to teach. And I was grateful that I don't think kids should have to worry what they're gonna do when they get to, what are you gonna do when you,
Yeah.
I understand why we do that, but I think it's such a gift when kids do whatever they do to discover themselves. I think, I thought I was gonna teach it.
You want to teach little kids, but like,
Yeah, crazy. I mean, I don't know that I would have been terrible, but I wouldn't have been patient. No, it would have been, I'm picturing a classroom of like 20 kids, and the noise and no. So, and it really was almost like a godly intervention when I was walking across the street from the dormitory at Carroll to the, what they call it, the pit. I don't know, Union Pit, whatever they call it. And I was walking over there and I happened to run into the head of the education department. And I introduced myself and he was really in a bad place. And and he said, gosh, you're just not going to be teaching jobs for all you guys because there's so many of us. We're boomers, that we're just all over the place. Come on, move on. We'd like some space here, ladies and gentlemen. And I thought, holy cow, if there's not going to be jobs. And it was that day I switched to sociology.
really?
Not much I mean, you can do a lot with sociology if you're willing to get your PhD, but
Yeah.
or your social worker.
Yeah, you're not going to be. So my father had a degree in sociology. He was a musician. So
So that's really.
so you chose sociology because it's like, well, I'm interested in people, and then we'll see what happens.
I was getting married. I never planned on going back to school. And I had a therapist, Linda, who also is deceased and honest. If you do seek any kind of therapy, be fussy, but also appreciate what you have, because what an 30 years. And she said to me in about 2000, I don't know, 2004, 5, 6, somewhere in there. And she said, why don't you go back to school? I got my master's. Me? No, that's like, oh no. And I hated school, as you can understand.
Yeah, because memorization and all that.
Exactly. And so but I did. And I'm quite confident I wouldn't have done it if she hadn't pushed me along. And I got my master's at 50.
What was your focus?
Communications, interpersonal communications and conflict management. And there's another little bit of a crying moment.
Yeah.
At the end of that, I was like, did I do that? Even my, what they call it, advisor.
Yeah. When
I finished the meta-analysis that I did, and that is like the last thing I should have been doing. Meta-analysis, no. She said, I didn't think when I turned my thesis in, I didn't think you were going to finish it. Yeah. So I was really grateful to put that in, and somebody said, you can get your PhD now. And I said, I'm not, this is painful. But what it did, it allowed me then to step into roles to teach.
Yes. Okay.
And so I finally got to teach after 40 years, 30 years. I got my wish that I had my bossiness wish that I had on the front steps.
So I'm guessing it wasn't little kids. Yeah. Where did you teach?
Grad students and undergrads. As an adjunct, which is a great way to do it. It's a great way to do it. If you have a full-time job and you want a number of former students of mine and are doing it now, it's really fun to see that. But it's a really great way to do it. And I think they get a rich experience from it because you're not necessarily, and to my faculty friends, you're not necessarily there in the institution. You might be working outside and going there, but that was another moment. That was huge.
It probably ignited something.
Oh, it was huge.
What was the path? So I kind of, when we started talking about your bio, even when I was reading about you, like there's some paths, some things like, okay, yes, this is obvious. This makes sense. But how do you go from passion in education, knowing that you connect to people, wanting to teach, to public office?
Hmm?
Because public
Yeah.
office, as you know, I have experience with that, not myself, but people that I'm really close to.
Sure.
And that's a different energy, and there's something, a very distinct thing when you go down the path of public office legislation. What was the attraction and what was the pathway? Like, how did you?
I'm not sure it's as different as we think. We tend to compartmentalize our professions. I'm going to be a professor, or I'm going to be a this, or I'm going to be a that. If I had known what I was doing and I didn't know like I feel now, I would say for anyone, the thing that brings you joy, the thing that the experience where you feel like the time passes so quickly, you're in that zone. Those moments are the moments that to me inform you about what you want to be doing in your life, not being. You might want to, your being is a different thing, but you want to get as close to being and doing in the same space. So it's, when I think about it, chatty Cathy in some ways, nothing against my friends Kathy. I think what I loved was that in social engagement, and I loved watching things change. I don't know if any of you ever moves furniture in your apartments or your homes or something. I move furniture all the time. Now it's getting less and less because we're downsizing, but I love seeing if I take the three of you and I take Lisa and a number of you, and I stick you in three groups, and I give you a question, and I have you talk about it. I love watching the transformation. That transformation can happen in systems, they can happen in organizations, it can happen just on the street, And I think I derive great pleasure in seeing that transformation, because what I saw growing up was like, they're stuck. It's toxic, it's painful, it's harmful, and there's no movement. So it's sort of like a leader I'm going there, who calls him or her or their self a leader, who for all purposes ought not to do that. They may think that because their position is what it is, that they have that, they've been ordinated or ordained role. You're the leader. In my mind, you're the leader if you're willing to explore yourself and hold not judgment, but understanding of who you are, what needs to change, and you have the courage to do it. If you're asking everybody else to do it around you, in the family, in the workplace that you have, that's not leadership. I don't know what that is. That's a person in a job who probably makes more money than you do and is in denial or doesn't want to know the joy of truly knowing themselves, even when it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. It's always hard for all of us at some level. It could be less hard for some people. But that's a whole nother session.
So true leadership is.
You did this? All right. So you, in the questionnaire, you said good leadership. What is good leadership? And what did I say? I said, there's no good leadership. There's either leadership or there's nothing. So what was the last word you used? Not good, but what was the word you just used? I'll play that. I'll play that.
Okay.
Okay. True leadership is what you find, what you have in terms of recognition about who you are. Not what you do, comes later, but who you are, and an awareness. This is going to get tricky. I'm getting all brainy here, of what your triggers are. so that when you are triggered by someone who looks a certain way, someone who acts a certain way, someone who has a certain behavior, you're able to slow yourself down, recognize that this is about you, your reaction is about you, and not take it out on that person, but give that person what they need. In a way that it very well may be that that person needs leadership in a sense of, we need to talk, we need to be direct. I can't tell you how many years I spent in human resources having managers tell me, well, I don't want to say that to them. Yeah, they're not really working very well. They're not doing very well. They're treating someone really badly, or they're acting in a way that's inappropriate. But I don't want them to feel bad. The reality is, it's not about you not wanting them to feel bad. You don't want to feel uncomfortable. And so if leadership is about feeling uncomfortable, it's about managing yourself. And if you're on that computer, yes, I'm a boomer, but believe me, I have my 3 sizes of screens. So if you're not managing your time like that, and your kids, and I wish I could have back some of my time, that's you. Deal with it. That's the mark of leadership. Does that answer you?
Love that.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad.
If you've had in relationships with your husband,
Absolutely.
give them what they need, don't react because you feel a certain way. That's what your relationship needs.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Having had marriage counseling. So, give your best of yourself and know where the boundaries are, that you can't change other people if you are unwilling to address the change that needs to occur in you. But you're absolutely right. It's no different. I love that phase. I'm loving that phase.
Woo! Things that needs to occur in you. I'm like, oh, I got some stuff to work on. Sophie, what do we have online in the chat?
So first of all, we had about 90 people joining us in our Zoom, and so
So got bored and dropped off.
just towards the end, because they knew we were wrapping up. Rob says, what do you say about effective leadership is in part knowing your audience and then adjusting your response according to what they need?
But yes. In some ways, I would say that it is knowing your audience, but before you know your audience, know yourself. Know how you're reacting to this person. So if you're going into a performance review, is a tough process. I hated that. And they're not designed to be, I'm sorry, but it's like if you brought yourself on a daily basis as an actual leader to situations with employees, it seems to me you would address things as they occur. And so there wouldn't even be a need for it. But I think if you're going into a performance review, you want to be, or a meeting. Oh my God, how many times have I done meeting? Yes. If you're going into a meeting, know your audience, sit down. If you've got a group of 5, if there's a team you're working with, sit down and actually do your own private little analysis. This one, I get triggered when this one does this. I get triggered when this one does this. This one, it tends to be conflict avoidant. This one needs to be there on time. This one, if you can know your employees and your audience to that extent, you're actually preparing yourself so you don't get triggered. That way, you can be much more sensitive to how they're receiving information. Remember that if you get triggered, your cerebral cortex, your executive functioning, all but shuts down, depending on how triggered you are. So you're not able to think. Now you're thinking from your amygdala, from your hippocampus, from your, the cortisol and the adrenaline and all that. That does not allow you to think in a way that's helpful. I mean, if you prepare for your audience and you prepare yourself for what they can receive, it's particularly if it's bad news. Do you ever hear of sandwiching in a review? Terrible idea. Don't know who did that, but be upfront. Be honest. Tell them what's good, tell them what isn't, but be upfront. And then invite them to tell you how they want to. So I know it's a long answer to your question, Sophia, but, or what was his name, Rob?
Rob Smith.
Yes.
Any other questions in the room?
We have a couple more online if there are no questions.
Oh,
So how do you be your authentic self in the workplace when you were raised not to rock the boat?
Ah. Oh, that's a tough one. Well, I think the first thing you do when you're interviewing is that you make sure that you understand the culture that you're going into. And that when you go into an interview, you're not there to so much, frankly, to be interviewed. You're there to interview them. Find out what kind of boss you've got. And if you don't have that kind of expertise, then sort of talk it over with someone in advance and after before you make your decision, because the culture you go into is the culture you go into. And changing that right away. If you are told that you shouldn't push it, if you have a friend that you work with or somebody that you trust, ask them, I know I'm pushy. That's the word that's used for females when they're being direct. There are ways to be that are not as offensive as other ways. So I would say just have them practice with someone and listen to them to see if they really are being as obnoxious as they think they are. And then spend some time really asking folks, what is okay? That's the other thing, we don't necessarily ask questions. Leave the silence there. It's okay to ask questions. You know, would it be okay if I did X, Y, and Z? I've not said one swear word in this entire thing. This is astounding for me. I'm sorry, I wrote it community. Whenever I go with someone who I'm just hanging out with, even though that I always ask them. And 9 times out of 10, oh, thank goodness, I'm so glad, because it doesn't bother me. But I wouldn't do it here. It's no different. Find out what the culture is and find out what would be okay.
one more quick one.
Last one from Regina White. Do you believe that it takes courage to have integrity or stand on your values and beliefs?
Absolutely, 150,000%. Yes. Because if you can be you, try, I know. But it is, in my experience, the most central part of your existence, of your being, is to be who you are. That's where your gifts lie. And it takes incredible courage to do that. But please, I cannot tell you enough. I'm so grateful that I lived this long. And I really want to live a whole lot longer. But the one thing I feel like I wished I'd done, I still love it, is that I had started that journey of knowing myself, perhaps at a younger age, and not being so frightened that I wasn't willing to get out there. And truth is, Corey Joe and Lisa, people like Paul, people like this. The reason I'm here, because I'm writing 2 books, the reason why I'm here is because of them. I got my courage from the courage I saw in my students and in my friends.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for your courage. And thank you for seeing. Like, thank you for the things that you see, because some of them I didn't want you to see because I didn't want to be exposed. And other things you saw before I could see.
Yeah.
And I needed to know that they existed before I would look for certain things in myself.
Yes.
And you helped me a lot, like a lot, probably more than we've ever talked about, but I'm grateful
Yeah.
to know you and thank you for doing it. So Christine Hill,